Good morning, good evening, to some good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles. If you are new to the program, please hit the like, please hit the subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the bell so you are notified every time we go live with a new program, as we're constantly changing and adding programs to the show. It's an interesting day here because we're finally dealing with the time change. For those that aren't aware, only this country changed their time. So the rest of the world is operating at the time that we were operating on like last week or 2 weeks ago. So our guest and one of our co-hosts is going to be a tad bit late, but that's okay because we have segments on this show that will definitely fill the time. A new trigger warning I'm excited for. As we were off air talking, the co-hosts don't know what it is exactly. I had a talk with some friends of show, and this is going to be great. So let me bring in the hosts. He is my co-host. He is my homie. He is my dog. He is a writer for Newsweek, Black Agenda Report, working on his own book. He's my favorite phone call to get at 4 a.m. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. It's Saturday.
It's Saturday. That's my favorite De La Soul song. Is
Saturday. You know one of the De La Soul homies is Haitian, right?
Which one?
Listen, I always confuse Plug 1, 2, or 3. The chunky light-skinned one who had the heart problem. Not
the one whose son passed away.
Not Matheou and not the
Not Matheou. Oh, the other one.
Right.
Okay. Trugoy. Which is
True
like,
they always jack me up with the names, man. They always jack me up with. That's like the only rap group where I still can't get the names down.
They're on some silly shit, but silly stuff. But I will say, I bought a cassette single in 1992 of the roller skating jam named Saturday single, and they added like a bunch of songs to that cassette single. This is, let's ask Marcus if this is still a thing. Let's bring in, all the way live, somewhere outside of D.C. He is Marcus of the Left Flank Bets.
Yo, Raytheon Acres. He represented.
So, let me ask you this. So when we were young, like groups that we really dug, like I know Hyro used to do this. You buy the single and they have like the song, maybe a B-side and an instrumentals, right? But then they throw in a whole other track. De La would do this. Tribe would do this, where they'd have a remix on there that was like a totally different song.
Yeah.
You can't still do that?
No, not that I've seen.
Everything's so digital now.
I mean, yeah, like hell. Now like I'm scared that they're just gonna do that as like NFTs or some shit like that. It's gonna be lame. But gotcha. No, because like we've talked about like even like opening a CD or cassette, having like the booklet and all that stuff, and like listing all the way through. And then seeing if there's a bonus track. Yeah,
so digital music had me fucked up for a while because another band that I'm not ashamed to be a massive fan of, Jamiroquai, on their, I think, Traveling Without Moving album, has a bonus track that is the fucking jam. And it took me forever to find because I never knew the name of the song. So digitally, I'm like, how am I going to find this track digitally? So they name it digitally as bonus track. It's just called like bonus track. But I missed that. And that cassette single, of course, if you have the vinyl single for a roller skating jam named Saturday, has all my favorite songs from De La Soul because it was all posse cuts with people like Black Sheep and Jungle Brothers and Tribe. So that was for me, that's the 90s. I saw somebody tweeted out the other day that's a fan of the show. They said the 90s was some sort of like cultural wasteland. And I was thinking to myself,
Oh, no, that's not fair. That's not fair.
From what standpoint? Like musically, rap music still tries to sound like the 90s. Even the music that I play is having a resurgence to look and dress like the 90s.
Who was the person who said that to you? You don't have to name the name, but what was their kind of political orientation? If you
they're fans of our show, so they're young leftists.
I mean, listen, if we look at the 90s from the vantage of the hyper political left, I could understand why you would say the 90s is somewhat of a cultural wasteland, because pretty much all of the popular culture, barring some, and I know, Jason, I think you would criticize my statement that grunge doesn't embrace capitalism, because I think you have a critique of that. I would argue that almost all of the popular culture of the 90s exists in the frame of capitalist realism, right?
I'll add this to grunge. I'll add this caveat to grunge. Yes, I do think everything embraces capitalism, and what grunge is the epitome of anti-politics. The epitome.
That's fair, and I'm not qualified to debate you on that. You know that music better than I can begin to assess. But to say that the 90s was a cultural wasteland is a bit of an I can't necessarily say that per se. I would say that it's a period of a hyper capitalized cultural production, but there is culture. For example, what they called what called Nouveau Soul, or what was it? The
Neo Soul.
Neo Soul, yeah,
comes out of the 90s.
Neo Soul. There was a lot of that music I really liked. I really liked that music. It comes out of more the 80s and goes into the 90s.
Here's my point why I think that's such a bad comment. If you look at that music that you're talking about, and here, 1 second, I'm gonna put a pin in that point. Let's bring in everyone's favorite non-binary super soldier, so said by a fake Twitter personality that isn't a real person. Stefan Bertram Lee.
What up, Stefan, Mike?
And let's bring in real quick the person that put this show together, me, Djene Bajalan.
Greetings, everybody. Hey, I want to apologize.
No. Listen. First of all, you're in another country. You're back to drinking tea, pinky out.
How do we know he's going to apologize for the time zone thing? So we should hear him out, because we don't know if Djene did something else.
He made this mistake earlier in the week when he set Gaming Materialist to go an hour later, and I forgot to email him. So I'm going to put some of the onus on myself. I saw the mistake made, and that's when I realized, oh, yeah, the rest of the world. First of all, I realized when I had to reset my internet the other day, and my TV was off an hour, and I was like, what's going on? I forgot I lived in Mexico.
They don't have daylight saving time in Mexico. It's only America.
It's only America.
So your time in Mexico,
in the UK, but it's on a different schedule.
Yeah, it's on a different schedule. George Bush changed it in the 90s. Back to Dude's point, in the 90s or 2000.
I have to object to the notion that the 90s was a cultural wasteland, because it gave us both the Spider-Man cartoon series, the X-Men cartoon series, and the Batman cartoon series.
All that.
It also gave us loads of anime, like the good anime, not the bad anime.
I think some of the 80s and 70s anime is fucking badass. Sorry.
Now it's all weird. It's all weird, like cat people and stuff. But like, I mean,
it was all weird, but I'm weird in a different way.
That's Thundercats Erasure. Which,
oh yeah, that's true.
I'm not just gonna sit here idly by and allow that to slide. So,
but I want to. While we wait for our guest, I do want to start the trigger warning segment, and this is Stefan. If Stefan knows this movie, props, because not only are you from Wales, you are also 20 years younger than us, and probably were not checking for this film. If Djene knows this film, I'm also going to be shocked, because again, you're coming from a whole different world where this shit is not relevant. But this was a very, very hot movie at the time. I believe this was Queen Latifah's first movie role. This is where we meet Samuel Jackson playing the man that we know him as today. And this is where what's the black dude's name? Wesley Snipes gets a reputation for boning down in every film. The movie starts with Wesley Snipes just boning down.
Hold on, what movie is this?
This is called Wesley Snipes Hangs Dong.
This is one of my favorite Spike Lee movies.
Okay. This is Jungle Fever.
Yo, babe, bruh, Cyrus, black men, successful in shit. I want y'all to meet my new woman, Viv. That's short for Vivian. She good people. I like her.
Yeah.
I was most fortunate to make her acquaintance most recently. That's my baby brother, Flipper, the one I've been telling you about. Yeah, architect and shit. And that's his main man, Cyrus. He, Damn, what is it you do again?
I teach high school.
Damn, that's right here, high school teacher and shit. You know, hey, I'm sorry, man. You know, my mind's getting bad.
I gotta go.
You leaving me?
I gotta go.
You promised.
I promise. My lips are sealed. Vivian, nice to meet you. Gator. Peace, two fingers.
Peace. Yo, Viv, would you let two loving brothers get a moment alone to get reacquainted and shit, you know what I'm saying?
Where the fuck am I supposed to go? I know where the fuck I am.
Don't give a fuck where you go. Can't you stand there after the school? You sit in the motherfucking swing and wait for me.
Swing, motherfucker, that's cold. Get out here. I'm
trying to get some motherfucking money from my brother here. Goddamn it.
What do you want, motherfucker? Motherfucker,
Stick this shit in your mouth. Shit. Smoke this shit. Shut
you
the fuck up.
motherfucker, give me a motherfucking light, goddamn.
Here, take this goddamn lighter. Take this goddamn lighter. Kill your motherfucking ass.
You better hurry your ass or you better come back with some motherfucking money, motherfucker. Shit.
Go.
Cold out here.
You freeze your motherfucking ass off. Just go. Shit. Oh, I like her. Look here, baby, bro. I'm a little light right now. Could you, let me hold some change?
No, Gator, no. That dancing shit ain't gonna work. I ain't giving you a red cent.
What? Come on, you could do me this one solid. What? Would you rather I go out and rob some elderly person? Steal? Either way, I'm gonna get high. But I really hate having to resort to knocking elderly people in the head for their money. But I'll do it. You know I'll do it. Yeah, you know I'll do it. I like getting high. I'm a crackhead. Ow. I like you getting high.
So so Pascal is not triggered because he remembers the film, but here's the thing that I wanted you guys to think about here for a second. I feel very comfortable calling myself someone that has been around a lot of real life crackheads, a ton of real life crackheads. I might be a bit of a expert in crackheadishness.
Crackheadiology.
That's a serious resume builder right there.
Crackologist, if you will. In all my years of being around crackishness, never, ever, never have I seen a motherfucker dance for crack. Now, I've seen break dancers that might have a drug problem. I've seen people that are street musicians that might have drug problems, but never have I seen a person walk up to their family, because usually there's a lot of shame in begging, right? That's how begging works. You walk, I'm so sorry. I used to live in the Tenderloin where I would wake up so early to get to work that I knew the homeless cats that had the begging routines, and I would see them when they were rolling out their shit, like the guys that would pretend they had no legs and shit. Like I would see all the motherfuckers and would be like, hey, what's up, brother? Like I knew these cats, and never did I see them dance a jig. I'm gonna get, and so there's another scene in the movie that I wanted to get where he dances for his mom. She's like, Gator, dance for me, Gator. And he's like, Mama, I'm gonna smoke the TV, Mama. And he ends up, it's ridiculous. But that goes back to what our friend Bertram Cooper wrote about like who gets to write for black people. Obviously, Spike Lee's ideal, unless he just has a singing, dancing, Al Jolson, crack smoking, dope shooting motherfucker in his family, I don't know. But I've never seen that person. And so that's very coonish behavior. And guess what I found out, Pascal?
What's that?
That's no longer coonish behavior.
Dancing for crack isn't coonish anymore?
No, dancing for crack is not coonish. You know why?
Why?
Because the word coon has been redefined.
What is it now? Hairstyle?
Literally. I'm being totally serious. Coon now means a black guy who worships white girls and does not like his own race.
God damn, man. That's half the guys I went to law school with.
I just need to say, 1990s Samuel L. Jackson should definitely play Pascal in TIR the movie.
Why?
Taye Diggs, because he's got that exciting New York.
You mean because he's an angry black guy?
I mean, he wasn't angry in that clip. He was very happy.
I wouldn't want no 90s crack acting MF playing me anytime, anywhere. I've never touched drugs in my life.
Is this asshole?
Now, I want this is a good riff subject. I'm glad you showed that. First of all, I'm going to do a little, how should I say, expression, self-revealing here. I'm critical of a lot of Spike Lee movies in today in retrospect, but I'm going to be very transparent. Because I am a teenager and an adult of the 80s, I was very enthralled by Spike Lee's movies in my youth. And Jungle Fever is actually one of my favorite Spike Lee movies. One of the reasons why Jungle Fever is one of my favorite Spike Lee movies is that when Jungle Fever came out, I literally was living the life of Flipper Purify. I was literally in a relationship long-term with my long-term college sweetheart, who was a black woman, and I actually started cheating on her with a Sicilian Italian woman.
You bring her stringy head ass up in here?
Pascal, the traitor.
I was, when I was watching that movie, I was so triggered. I was like, does this guy have cameras in my life right now?
Was your brother smoking crack and dancing?
you what's up, brother?
I'ma smoke the TV. I smoked the TV, mama.
No, that part wasn't happening. But when I watched that movie, I was like, how is this possible? Like, I literally was like, someone is tracking me. What's going on? Like, this is like, what's happening? This is not cool at all. But I eventually ended up breaking up with the Italian woman, and it was a very crisis period in her life. But you got to remember though, right? I was a hardcore black nationalist in my college years, right? So when I'm dating this woman, I'm going through all kinds of like existential crises. I was like, how can this be happening? What's going on here?
So it's going to be like she has to live across the street though, like on the borderline.
Oh my God.
So I mean, it was really funny, like watching that while I was actually doing that particular reality in my own life. But the thing is, like, one of the things, Jason's talking about, like, the dancing crackhead, and I'm not going to disagree with his assessment, but there is something that's really, really fascinating about Jungle Fever if you are an adult or young person in that period of time. There was a certain level of class penetration of crack addiction into like middle class Negroes. Like that's not untrue. Like, I mean, the thing about that movie, like, that shit happened to some people where you had middle class, upstanding black families, and there was someone in the family that was totally cracked out.
Well, also, I mean, we have to keep in mind what crack was cheaper, stronger cocaine. So I think something is missed in the cultural critique of the acceptance of cocaine kind of being a wonder drug. Cocaine is on the cover of Time magazine as this is the drug that's going to change the world for us. We're going to be able to do more. We're going to have more fun. I remember asking it's my mom's cousin, but I called him my uncle because he was so much older than me, and he did a lot of drugs. I remember asking him, what's cocaine like? And he said, Jason, and I was probably like 10, 11. He goes, it's like having an orgasm from your toes all the way to the top of your head.
That feels like a bit much.
Scared me away from doing drugs. I was like, man, I can't deal with that.
But no, listen, man. I know Torre hates Spike Lee movies, and I know why Torre hates Spike Lee movies, right? Because Spike Lee, like Torre, is a fellow Afro-Saxon, multi-generational, black, college-educated, middle-class, black person. But I think what Torre really kind of resents about Spike Lee, and I think this is fair, is that Spike Lee tries to front like he's a brother from the hood who's just a nouveau riche striver. You know what I'm saying? First of all, there's a lot of things about Spike Lee that I find really kind of cartoonishly anachronistic in terms of timing. Spike Lee is like 10 years older than I am.
Is he really?
And he's a total hip hop fan. I was like, yo, Spike, cats your age were rocking during disco. Like, hip hop was the music of your younger brother. I mean, that's like, it's the same reason why I hear like Michael Eric Dyson talking about like, oh, I love Nas. I was like, Dyson, by the time Nas was coming out, you were probably like on your second child and your fourth divorce. Like, what are you talking about? You're a fan of Nas. Dude, you were listening to Shallow Ball with a Jerry curl in your hair in like 81. Come on, what are you talking about?
But first of all, please don't.
Is he like the same kind of age as Kamala Harris?
Yeah, he should be. Spike Lee?
She's another fake kid.
He's older than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is like 3 or 4 years older than me.
Yeah.
Nah, man. Yo, no, listen. Dyson is a late baby boomer. Like, Dyson is the age of like my older cousins. I was like, my dude, yo, you would go in the Studio 54 in like 77. What are you talking about? You love Nas. I mean, come on, man.
He was trying to get in the Studio 54.
Yeah, I mean, he's from Detroit because he wasn't.
Oh, so he was doing something totally different.
But the point I'm trying to say is that, like, with him and Spike Lee, is that the generational assumption of culture to try to seem hip is like so transparently kind of a fraud that it's a bit annoying. I'm not saying you can't like hip hop and be 65, 66 years old. I'm not saying that. But to try to act as it is the cultural accoutrement that is normative for your generation is a load of crap, man.
I'm just imagining like Jason like talking about like music that I listen to now, being like, yeah, I grew up with this shit, man.
I grew up with this shit. I always tell my old friends now that like love, or my friends, we're all old, that love shitting on like new hip hop. I'm like, look, dude, it's not for you. It's okay.
No, straight up. I mean, listen, I don't even talk about it being bad or good. I don't like it, but it's not the music of my generation.
Yeah, it's just not for you. It's not made for you. It's not. I don't want to listen to some fucking 19-year-old kid talking about being a snitch and a dope fiend and be like, yeah, this is cool. I'm like, this fucking sucks. This is dope fiend rap. That's what you guys like. Then, hey, hats off to dope.
I mean, the thing is, though, right? Like, one thing that, Jason might remember this because when Jason and I are a little bit more contemporary in age, but I think this is kind of a regional thing. We got to remember, right, that hip hop very early in the 80s is being marketed as not only the radical urban music, it's also a New York City bohemian vibe. Don't forget, you have what's his name? Fab Five Freddy, who's hanging out with.
I think I told you my story about Fab Five Freddy. I was asking Biz Markie about Basquiat. I was like, oh, did you hang out with Basquiat back in the day? Biz Markie looks at me, he's like, who the fuck is that? I was like, well, he knew Fab Five Freddy. He goes, look, man, Freddy hung out in the village with them other niggas.
Yeah, because there was this interface with like Fab Five Freddy, and particularly with Def Jam, Rick Rubin, the punk scene. There's this early
that whole world. Yeah,
there's
but Spike Lee comes out of that world.
Yeah, there's an early kind of fusion connection between the New York City punk scene and early hip hop. So there is this kind of like bohemian vibe.
Let me ask you this, Pascal, about the vibe that you're talking about. There was an article that came out years ago about that scene that Spike Lee was coming out of. So it's him in film. It's Rosie Perez actually in dance.
Wesley Snipes was in that crew too.
Vernon Reed in the music.
What's the name of the brother?
The late Jeff Tate is part of that scene as well. It was supposed to be this new.
The new Black Bohemian is the new Black Bohemians.
I think there's a whole article. I can't remember the magazine it was.
Yeah. Let me tell you, Jason, man, that's why I love Jason. Man, Jason is such a cultural aficionado of various times and places.
You remember shit.
But let me tell you, right? Greg Tate was in that scene. Mm-hmm. What's the name of the brother who is always the music writer? Who's always doing the documentaries.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm talking about. He's from New York.
The newest crack documentary, yeah.
Oh, what is the brother's name, man?
I can't think of his name. I know who you're talking about.
But he was in that scene. And listen, I knew those cats were kind of bullshit when they were doing that. And I tell you why.
Nelson George, yes.
Nelson George, thank you, Nelson George. Yes. You know why, bro? There was no politics to that shit.
None.
That the whole vibe of that 80s Black Bohemian was like, we are the new Harlem Renaissance, but in Brooklyn during the age of Reaganism. And hip hop is our real new cultural expression. It was profoundly shallow and vapid. I feel that the politics, I believe that the cultural criticism and analysis of that time was profoundly shallow and vapid. I don't think much of them had an effect. The only class analysis that they were doing was like the Black middle class hates hip hop. They always hate Black creative music. Like there was no criticism of the development of the Black urban regimes under Black mayors. All of it was. It's, what's really fascinating, and I got Jason shout out for bringing this up again, man, is that much of the really vapid Black politics that we see today really has its roots in that era. To be very, very true, because I was on Ben Dixon's show as I mentioned the other day, when we were talking about the evolution of Black politics, right? And as Jason and I know, I think we mentioned it here, like in the 70s. When those guys come out of the civil rights movement and also Great Society government jobs, and they start to become mayors, right? Mm-hmm. They at least have to maintain the charade of redistributive policy to the Black poor and working class, if not policy-wise, at least rhetorically. Mm-hmm. By the time the 80s comes in, mass incarceration is kicked in, it's really this kind of austerity, but we got a Black mayor. We got a Black mayor. We got a Black mayor. And what you see, right, is that element of we got a Black mayor, we got a Black president, we got a Black potential governor, still maintains its legitimacy in contemporary Black politics, and also the austerity-like lack of redistribution of the 80s generation transformed into sheer neoliberalism and pro-corporatism, and went even the complete opposite direction, starting in the millennium with the kind of iteration, and we've talked about this before, Jason, the kind of the trial balloon of the purely neoliberal Black politicians, which is Barack Obama, Cory Booker, Adrian Fenty, Hal Ford Jr., and Arthur Davis.
I was wondering if ask a question about do you think that without the a real mature class critique or even political critique in hip hop, it even allows hip hop to be kind of like the scapegoat for Black politicians to basically stand on high and say it's a cultural wrong that's happening within the black community and not actually an economic.
Say it again for the viewers. Shout out to Marcus Left Flank with a very important, very important interjection. Is hip hop anything more but a musical sound garden of underclass ideology? Jason?
Well, I mean, now a lot of it is like a white middle class ideological garden, but yeah.
I mean, hip hop now, I just discovered, and I'll be brief, and I think I talked about this the other week. I just discovered this whole thing called scam rap. It's this kid out of Detroit, and these dudes, they just talk about scams that they do on the internet. And
I mean, there's a really famous song by an old kind of leftist hip hop collective about this. I can't remember.
Dead Prez, exactly. Hell yeah.
Dead Prez, yeah. Yeah, hell yeah.
But the
I just listened to this song like a few days ago.
It's a sick song.
The scams are like, it's not, they don't really rhyme. They're way off beat, and they're literally telling you how to like do these Instagram scams. Or
so it's more like songs that teach you how to cook crack, like instructional.
Yeah, but what's funny about the crack cooking songs is that you nod your head to it, and then you sit back and go, wait a minute, you just had kind of sort of the recipe on how to cook crack. These songs, you can't even nod your head. It's like, and then you go to the ATM and beat the bitch in the head, and then you kick the car. And I'm like, why would you do this? You're gonna, and they're like, I'm too smart for you. And I'm like, look, dude, I may not be the smartest cat in the world, but there's one thing that I've seen over and over again is that dumb motherfuckers love telling on themselves.
Stop self-snitching.
They love it. The new era is the drama of self-snitching. So there was a time before the self-snitching era where it was like you had to have a backstory about getting shot. And it got so bad, the backstories were like, well, I lived in a group home for a month. It's like, well, that's sad, I guess, for you, but that's not really that.
Doesn't make you hard.
But that's what it was. Like, this makes you hard. So now it's like, I'm not hard. I probably have a drug problem, which automatically means that I'm probably going to be a sad sack of shit. And number 3, I just do these internet scams and I suck. Because I'm a snitch, and I'm telling the police how other people are doing internet scams, ultimately setting up other people that might come get me for telling on them. Like, I can't go around telling on Marcus for robbing a bank. Marcus wore a mask, and then he has some khakis.
This is his license plate number.
Yeah, like who the fuck does that and doesn't get fucked up? And
do you want to hear a lyric of a song? Which is it's just been stuck in my head for ages as the kind of music I listen to.
Uh-huh.
She says she loves me, but I'm a haunted house.
Oh God. Oh, is that
what the fuck does that mean?
Oh.
Yo, listen, man, I'm still tripping off of
You're vacant and open for someone to tidy up the place. I don't.
It's like I'm not in a haunted house. I am a haunted house.
Look, dude, you know that I worked at Coachella for far too many years to go there and be like, look, I hate everything here, and I'm wearing earplugs, and now I'm just an old curmudgeon telling kids to pull up their pants.
Well, listen, you know what's really kind of interesting about this whole. I didn't expect the show to be going this conversation. I came here thinking we're going to be talking about Cyprus and Turks and all kinds of stuff and all kinds of interesting Turkish delicacies and whatnot as well. But funny is that yesterday I didn't stumble on a friend of mine from Canada, Afro-Canadian woman, sister, who kind of takes issue with my consistent antagonism towards the black petite bourgeois and my class analysis of black people. You know, and usually the critique is like, why don't you talk about the white people? And I'm like, because everyone else only talks about the white people.
Is she the 7-Up guy from the 80s?
No, she's a nice woman. She's a very nice woman. She's a good sister. Good.
Man, you need to clip that voice clip and put it into the so that you can play that on command.
I need to put that on.
It's a very common thing, like culturally pro-black, not much into challenging capitalism. Let's all black people come together and hold hands. I love all the black people. I love wearing my African garb and attire. Not bad people, not horrible people, not the kind of politics I think is going to get us anywhere, quite frankly. And also an elite, college-educated, petite bourgeois politics as well. But still a nice person.
Hey.
And she sent me this German media-produced, Deutsche Welle-produced documentary on the new black upper class. And I was like, hold on. I was like, wow, 2 years of COVID in, massive economic precarity, George Floyd protests, voter suppression everywhere, black history being purged from state and public schools all over the country, and the black capitalist class is like, we are on fleek right now. Come on, in this documentary. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. I thought ADOS said all Negroes were broke. What happened?
ADOS didn't get the memo.
And I'll say a little sprinkle on top of that is that recently the what is it, like either the DA or whatever in Minneapolis has just said that they're going to utilize surveillance footage from the George Floyd protest to start criminal investigations on the protesters. So it's good, it's nice free country.
Shout out to Eric Adams, literally giving a whole press conference saying, don't videotape my police because you don't know.
Or like a range of like 10 meters or so. Don't like crowd. They're like frightened dogs.
They're like frightened dogs. They may bite.
So let me tell you something, man. Shout out to This Is Revolution and my co-host, man. Y'all really. Let me tell you something, man. Y'all brothers really indulged my intellectual proclivities and wanderings into various elements of various things, man.
Well, we have to admit that the trigger warning segment is a winner, and it will persist. But let's bring in our guest. Our guest is here. The island of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean has long been the site of intercommunal strife between the Greek majority and the Turkish minority. For centuries, the island formed part of the Muslim Ottoman Empire. However, in 1878, its administration was taken over by Great Britain, who still has some bases there, and it subsequently became a British colony. After a long campaign of resistance, the island ultimately won its independence in 1960. However, the new republic was riven by ethnic divisions between Greeks and Turks. Greek nationalists hoped to enact enosis, unification with the Greek mainland, while Turkish Cypriots opposed such efforts. In 1974, a Greek nationalist military coup attempted to enact unification with Greece. This was followed by a Turkish invasion that ended in ethnic cleansing and the partition of the island into Turkish and Greek administrations. Since that time, there have been numerous attempts to unify the island, yet none have succeeded. Today, we talk to Nik Matheou, lecturer in global medieval history at Edinburgh University, about the history of the conflict as well as the prospects for its future resolution. Please welcome the beautifully mustached, might I add. The mustache on this cat is on another level. You guys can't see it right now because I can see him in the virtual green room, but this mustache took time and care, and he definitely can't eat soup. Please welcome Nik Matheou. Is it Matheou or Matheou?
It's Matheou.
It's none of the above.
It's none of the above. It's Matheou. It's that classic Greek ending with the U in it, but it's not a very common one, so I don't mind.
Okay, so let me tell you this before we get started, and I hope you get a good kick out of this. So Djene Bajalan put this show together. He asked me, he goes, I know a guy. He can talk about what's going on in Cyprus. You want to talk about what's going on in Cyprus? This is like over a month ago. And I'm like, sure. The only Cyprus I know is a Cyprus freeway structure that collapsed during the 89 earthquake in Oakland.
Cypress Hill?
Oh, I also know Cypress Hill. Yes, Be Real and Cypress Hill. So the only Cypresses I know are nowhere near you. So I'm like, okay, well, give us time. So usually what Djene does is he gives us readings. Djene is back in the UK. He's definitely given us the middle finger when it comes to giving us readings. And I have to Google you, and I'm Googling the wrong Cyprus because I spelled it like the tree. So there's another man with your name that's older. I was like, so I'm like this morning. So I woke up at 3:00 in the morning to make sure I can get all of your information. And I go, Djene, this guy's Armenian? Djene goes, fuck are you talking about? I was like, he's like a 55-year-old Armenian, right? Djene goes, no, I think he's like from the Cyprus area and he's like 32. I was like, well, I've been reading the wrong shit.
It's fine. I know like 2 or 3 things about Cyprus, and I went on holiday there for a week once, so we're all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know that we are in very good hands. So thank you very much once again for taking the time to talk to us. And I did have to get my bungling out of the way. And you are not a 55-year-old professor, but there is someone that is.
No.
You might want to fight that guy.
Yeah, there's a 55-year-old professor, and I think there's a 9-year-old in Thessaloniki as well. There's a reason why on Greek forms it always asks for your dad's name, because we've all got the same names. It's the only way to tell people apart.
Professor Nick, let me ask you a question. Are you a Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot?
So that's a good place to start. I would, first of all, just say I'm a Cypriot. Because the legacy of these extra ethnic labels is one of colonialism. That before, the way coming out of the Ottoman Empire, the way that Cypriots were sort of distinguished was based on your religious affiliation more than anything else. Because really everyone was Greek speaking, including Armenian Cypriots, Maronites who are connected to Lebanon, as well as Muslim Cypriots. And it was really a strategy of the British Empire to take this Ottoman categorization based on religion and to transform it into an ethnic one in the 20s and in the 30s. So like a lot of the Cypriot radical left, I would just say I'm Cypriot. But that's the long answer. The short answer is that my family's Greek speaking and an Orthodox Christian. So Greek Cypriot for shorthand, but I think politically I always would just say Cypriot.
Your family wasn't displaced in the 70s. You were from the south, or?
No, so my family's from the north actually.
Okay.
It's from a place called Wrzesniewski, which is in the Karpaz now, which is on the very northern tip. So if Cyprus is sort of shaped a bit like that, then the south is sort of the bottom half now. There's a peninsula that goes up and sort of points directly to Syria, about 70 miles from Syria, and my family's from right on the northern tip.
Well, it's
so
funny.
It's in the occupied area now.
When we interviewed Yanis Varoufakis, who, as I'm sure you know who he is, and we on the off show, being that he's Greek, and we talked about something, and I was like, I always like to talk to Greek friends about this because I'm Haitian. I was like, so you know the history of Haiti aiding in Greek's independence from the Ottoman Empire, right? Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
He was like, you cannot be Greek on the left and not know this history, my friend.
Exactly.
He said, no, we all know this history.
So original revolutionary internationalism.
No, and shout out to my Greek comrade Maria Nicholasmaki, who is literally the person who informed me of this through Facebook, because I was totally oblivious of that history, as were sadly many Haitians, until she told me about it and gave me a book on it. And I was like, hold on, Haitians did what? And when? She was like, yes, they sent provisions and some say even soldiers to help the Greeks fight in the war against the Ottoman Empire in 1826, even though the president who did that was kind of a piece of crap, because he's also the one that got Haiti to sign the indemnity to which we had to pay France for our independence as well. But helping white people was something he had no problem with, but Negroes, not so much.
Well, Nick, can you give us a little bit of a historical background on the island of Cyprus and a little bit about this division that we see now between Turkey and Greece?
Definitely. So Cyprus, I think the first thing to say, and this might be in itself a bit of a surprising statement for many people watching and listening to this, Cyprus is a little island in the Middle East, or however you want to refer to it. It's in the Near East. It's in the Levant. As I said, where my family's from is 70 miles off the coast of Syria and Lebanon. And the reason why I say that's surprising is because now, ideologically and structurally, Cyprus is in the EU, and it's seen as a European space seen as a European city, European island. But that in itself is a legacy of whiteness and the colonial construction of whiteness, because Greeks have to be white in order to be the sort of basis of Western civilization.
Would you call yourself a person of color?
So I wouldn't, because for me, that's about how you're responded to structurally by institutions. And the fact is that because my surname's Greek, and so it gets normalized to Greekness, I get treated as a white person. And so even though in some contexts, like with Kurdish friends, with Syrian friends, we know that we're from the same region, we share a lot, I wouldn't claim that because it's just my experience of these institutions is just objectively different. And I think it would be insulting to say it. The irony is someone can come from exactly the same place that my family's from, and they'd be Kerem Matioglu rather than Nik Matheou, and they're very definitely racialized as non-white. They could look exactly the same or more white passing, but because they get put under Middle Eastern Muslim category, it's just different. But I would say that I'm Middle Eastern heritage, and I think that's an important thing to assert. And the history just shows it. Going far back, Cyprus was part of the Islamic Caliphate. It was taken by Crusaders during the Crusades, by Western Crusaders, and was a colony of Venice, and then was conquered by the Ottomans. So it's part of it's typical of the entire region's experience up until into modernity. Fast forwarding up to 1878, then it becomes part of the British Empire during this conflict between what they call the sick man of Europe. So when the Ottoman Empire is being divided up and is being predated upon by all the Western imperial powers. And basically what happens is in the late 1870s is that the Russian Empire executes a very successful war against the Ottomans and has a very favorable treaty that then the British force them to renegotiate. And as part of that, what happens is that the Ottomans lease Cyprus to the British. So from 1878 up until 1914 and the First World War, Cyprus is in this weird space where it's administered by the British, but there's an extra tax that's collected by the British that they then give to the Ottoman Sultan. So it's in this funny sort of mixed, like a double colony essentially of both the Ottomans and of the British Empire. But then in the context of the First World War, it gets declared a crown colony. And from then up until 1960, it's an official crown colony. And still today, as was referenced earlier, 3% of the entire territory of Cyprus is sovereign British territory. So it's officially, legally crown territory. And really, the funny thing is that in the early part of its history as a British colony, Cyprus wasn't all that important. It was a bit of a backwater. It was useful for the British to have, but it wasn't the home of the Middle Eastern policy.
Was it useful? I'm sorry. Was it useful because of its location as far as bases? Because I know there's two bases kind of on both sides of the island.
Yes. So there's a base.
Right?
There's a base in Akrotiri in the eastern side, facing towards Syria, and then there's another base in the south, facing to the western Mediterranean.
And they're both ports, right? Are they both?
They're both ports, and they're pretty large areas. And they're also, the key thing is they're aircraft carriers. That's what Churchill called Cyprus, the unsinkable aircraft carrier.
Well, I learned that with learning about U.S. empire and how it stretches out as well, and so many islands like Bikini Atoll and Puerto Rico, like we don't really think about why there's all these island bases. So, and I think definitely there's probably a lot of people in the UK that when you think about the United Kingdom, you think about that just landmass. You don't think about still some of the bases that they have strategically in other parts of the world. And I did find that interesting that both those bases were on opposite sides of the
Yeah, exactly. To be able to project power in both directions.
So there's no mineral resources that they're trying to pull. There's no oil. There's no.
No, it was about having a strategic area. Sorry, Stefan?
But there is a dispute now about oil in the Mediterranean between Cyprus and Turkey.
Yeah, so not actually. Well, they're drilling for oil sea, but hydrocarbons in particular. So there've been hydrocarbons that have been found in the exclusive economic zones, as they call them, between Cyprus and Israel. So there's a lot of power politics taking place now, where the Turkish state is trying to assert the rights of the so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus to take control over of some of these hydrocarbons. And we saw like that's now militarized drilling. So that's much more typical colonialism as we think, or imperialism as we think of it, like going for resources. Say, for example, in the same week that northern Syria was invaded by the Turkish state in 2019, they entirely surrounded the island of Cyprus with Turkish naval ships that were accompanying drilling ships going into the Eastern Mediterranean.
I mean, a strange thing happened with the Afrin invasion, right? That the leader of whatever you call the regime in northern Cyprus actually criticized the invasion.
Yeah, so that was the older leader who sadly isn't there anymore. He was called Mustafa Akinci, and he's a leftist. He's a leftist, and he had been making the most recent positive strides with a leftist president in the south called Christofias, and they had been really pushing, and so he criticized it in as much as he could, but yeah, since 2020 they've had another guy called Ersin Tatar, who is really just Erdogan's man. But this is fast forwarding a little bit. I think the interesting
Sorry about that. Sorry for the digression.
No, not at all. But it's just to underline that earlier on, Cyprus was a little bit of a colonial backwater, that Egypt was the most important place. They took Cyprus because it protected Egypt, and it was useful for sort of in a secondary sense, but it wasn't the heart of the colonial policy. It was really after the Second World War that you had Cyprus really becoming this crucial base, first for British imperialism and then actually for NATO imperialism. And it's the US in the 60s that's really making sure that the British bases stay there because they want to have a permanent NATO base there. And you get statements from that much celebrated, for some good reasons, but sort of slightly whitewashed post-war Labour government, where they say there is no chance of Cypriot independence at any point, because suddenly it's become geopolitically really crucial to keep the island. And obviously that only increased the anti-colonial struggle then, because they said there was no prospect of it.
Well, what I'm curious here is on questions of political economy, because Cyprus is high tourist, high income, and high on the human quality of life index as countries in the region is very, very high. Pretty much for an island of this size, who recently becomes independent within the last 60 years, Cyprus, compared to other post-colonial countries, is very affluent and quite rich. Yeah. So in terms of the context of a kind of counter-hegemonic narrative, what exactly is the position of Cypriots in terms of their challenge to quote-unquote empire, capitalism, imperialism, so have you, because they are part of the EU, they are a member of the Eurozone, it's a rich country, high amount of tourism. I mean, like, you know, what exactly is there even a need for a left in Cyprus? What exactly are the politics that make oppositional politics there necessary?
So it's a perfect question, because on one hand, yeah, it looks like a really wealthy tourist-based European country, and that does create a lot of contradictions. It does mean that's why you have quite a powerful right that has dominated electoral politics for a long time in Cyprus, because they see themselves as part of this European world. I think one thing to say is some of that's pretty recent. So in the years between independence and 1974, And especially earlier under the empire, that wasn't the case. Cyprus was a majority peasant country with very, very low levels of literacy. My bapu, my granddad, never learned to read properly, never learned to write properly till he passed away last year. And the average land holdings were very, very small. So there was a big landlord class. And especially a lot of rapacious mercantile activity. So my bapu told me stories about them renting land from the local landlord in order to grow tobacco, that they would then give a certain portion of that back to the landlord as rent, and then some of it they could sell on themselves to merchants. So in that sense, it's a very classic sort of colonial economy in lots of ways.
So would you compare that to sharecropping?
So there's some sharecropping, but it's mostly very small land holdings. We've got we have the documents still for how much land they had, and it's very small amounts of land. It's but it's individually held by particular people. So there's very small land holdings and then big estates. This started to change with the essentially with the movement of a huge amount of the population, including my family, to Britain, in like the same story with the rest of the empire and the sort of winds of change. Obviously the same up to a point, because a lot of the experience of Cypriots coming here was very different to Black and South Asian people coming from Africa, from Afro-Caribbean communities. But it's part of that same moment. And really, in terms of the political economy, one thing that changes massively is after 1974, funnily enough, because at the same time that Cyprus is going through this crisis in the 70s, you also have the start of the Lebanese civil war. And so a lot of the finance that had been based in Lebanon starts to move to Cyprus. And so there's the tourism on the one hand and finance on the other, means that there's more of an economy there, but people are still leaving. There's no prospects for the youth there.
Kind of even like going back to the influence of the British Empire, and then the UK. What would you say is like the effects, long-term effects of British rule? But then also too, if you can go into like what are the more cultural aspects of the dividing lines, between Greek and Turkish cultures, and even like in modern day, you've kind of even gone into it as far as like your name, but how does that also play out? In other aspects, where there's religion, institutions that people get involved in, let's say.
Definitely. I mean, my name's a good example. My granddad was the first person to be born with this name, because we didn't have surnames before. Like, it was a different system of naming. In the Ottoman Empire, they didn't have surnames like that.
Maybe they do it in the Ottoman.
Surnames are like a coincidental thing of like, when you get this, then modernity's happened, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's a technology of control, because then you can register people, you can start to organize property in a different way. So Matheou was just because my great granddad was called Matheos, so it just means the son of Matheou, the son of Matheos. But more broadly, what the British Empire did in Cyprus was exactly the same as what it did in Mandate Palestine and in South Asia and India. And there's really good research done here, especially by a guy called Yael Berda, where he compared these three spaces and looked at how the same technologies of divide and rule and strategies of divide and rule were implemented. So, for example, the Muslim community was explicitly targeted for recruiting the police force. And there were about 18% of the population was Muslim. And I should say, like, they're not mostly descendants of settlers during the Ottoman period. They're descendants of people who converted to Islam, and so they were entirely Greek speaking. I really like meeting some of the older Turkish Cypriots around North London, because you hear them speak a Cypriot dialect that actually doesn't exist as much in Cyprus now. So in terms of the culture, there was nothing meaningful to separate us. But once there was this, both the reality and as well the perception of the Muslims being the basis for British colonial rule. It meant that there was more of an anti-Muslimness and an anti-Turkishness. Because if, for example, you're looking to do an action against the British forces, at the same time, what you're doing is an action against the Muslim community, because they're the police. So if you're killing a policeman, or if you're taking revenge on a policeman, you're also targeting the Muslim community. And that was explicitly driven by the empire. Because I should say that in this first part of the 20th century, the other interesting thing is that the Turkish Republic wasn't really involved. In 1923, the treaty at Lausanne that established the Turkish Republic and peace between them and Allied forces, and also agreed this horrible mass mutual ethnic cleansing between Greece and Turkey. In that treaty, they gave up all territorial claims to the island of Cyprus. So it's not that at this point the Turkish state was actually involved in these communal conflicts. When the Turkish state
the reason that Cyprus wasn't
sorry.
The reason that Cyprus wasn't ethnically cleansed was because it was already British.
Yeah, exactly. It was already British. So what happens at the end of the Greco-Turkish War in the early 20s is that the new Turkish Republic and the Kingdom of Greece agree that they're going to do a population exchange. So 500,000 Muslims are forcibly kicked out of Greece, and 1.5 million Orthodox Christians are forcibly kicked out of Turkey. And the real violence of this is that for many of them, just like in Cyprus, the Muslims in Greece only spoke Greek, only felt Greek, especially in Crete. And the same in Turkey, especially in Cappadocia, you had only entirely Turkish-speaking Christian communities that are being kicked out.
Or if they spoke Greek, then it was quite a different dialect to what was spoken in
yeah, exactly, like in Pontus. But Cyprus escaped all of that for the moment, and then got a different version of it essentially in the 70s. So when the Turkish Republic gets involved in the 50s, that's because the British Empire resurrects their claims to try and offset Greek nationalism. It's a very clear strategy. So this is something that a lot on the Greek left and the wider Greek community especially, but even on the left, people forget. People blame the Turkish state rightly for a lot of the crimes, but they think it's the origin of the problem, and the origin isn't that. The origin is Western imperialism.
Well, you know, it's what's refreshingly interesting to me, Professor Nick, if you don't mind I call you Professor Nick, is that you're probably a Greek intellectual I find that has the most kind of sanguine, kind of like almost genteel attitude towards Turks that I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about just like a common Greek. I have not ever met a Greek person that didn't have like almost a biochemical allergic contempt and hatred for Turks in my life. I find this refreshing that, you know, you have this kind of very balanced kind of, you know, very, very progressive narrative of these events, because whenever I talk to even Greek left intellectuals, their hatred of the Ottomans, the Turks, is just visceral, man. Can you share what that's about? First of all, am I wrong? And can you share what?
No, you're definitely right. I should say, just to be clear, I hate the Turkish state with an undying passion, but that is not the same as Turkish people, and it's definitely not the same as what's now called the Turkish Cypriot community. I think Cyprus has a kind of unique or the Cypriot left in particular, and the radical left has a unique relationship to how they think about Turks as the sort of big other compared with Greece. And that's because of the context of Greek nationalism and the obvious role that Greek nationalism has played in bringing about this situation of division and occupation. And actually, it can even be taken to some extremes that I wouldn't agree with, where a lot of the sort of anti-state anarchist left in Cyprus won't even refer to the northern part as the occupied territories. They'll refer to it as the North because they see Greek nationalism as so much their primary enemy that they don't even want to accept this as an occupation. Now, I think that's going way too far for me. It's obviously an occupation, and we can't sort of be shy about that. But I think it's like was mentioned in the beginning. The spur for the Turkish invasion in 1994 was a Greek fascist coup. Like the colonels, the junta in Greece, organized through their even more right-wing recreation of the militant movement EOKA, called EOKA Vita. They organized the coup to try and essentially do what they called enosis, which means union of Cyprus with Greece. And this was always part of the Greek nationalist project. It's what's called the megali there, the great idea, which would be a sort of greater Greece that would include Istanbul, would include the coastal areas of modern Turkey, Anatolia at least, definitely include Pontus and also include Cyprus. And this is seen as the sort of natural Greece, kind of like a recreation of the old Byzantine Empire. And so because it's just so clear that without that moment, the Turkish state wouldn't have had the opportunity to invade. It wanted to anyway. It was looking for partition. And by that point, there was also a very developed Turkish nationalist movement that was connected to nationalists in Turkey, and that was already talking about what they termed Taksim, which means partition. So they were looking for the excuse, but the people who gave them that excuse were Greek fascists. So it means that Cyprus is actually a pretty perfect place as a radical leftist with the connection to realize that the nation state is a completely fucked paradigm that we need to entirely overcome.
You consider yourself an anarcho-communist, mate?
Yeah, I would put myself in that part of politics, definitely.
Is it true?
Communist, libertarian, socialist. In my political life, my main organizing is as an internationalist with the Kurdistan Freedom Movement. So anti-state is at the heart of my politics, and anti-nation state.
Yeah, I was going to say, Pascal, like Nick's language here, where he's talking about the Turkish state and always saying Turkish state and not Turkey and so on. This is language from the Kurdish Freedom Movement, and I assume this is kind of the distinction in kind of intellectual legacy between Nick and most people that most Greeks you've spoken to, which is him being very much involved in the Kurdish Freedom Movement.
And I remember reading somewhere, and Nick, this is definitely before your time, and if you knew this, I'd be very shocked, that George Michael, the singer, the Greek singer, was part of the Greek Communist Party. Is that true?
Yeah, so George. He's in all your hearts.
So you know George Michael. Okay. So.
We love Yorios Kachikiriagu. We love him. He's he's flying the flag for queer commie Cypriots everywhere. And yeah, he was a legend. He was a legend. It's absolutely true. He was his family were connected to Agel, which is still interesting to say. The main leftist party in Cyprus is Marxist-Leninist. It's the where everywhere else, and it's actually become more electorally successful after the fall of the USSR than before.
Yeah, they had a communist president.
Yeah, exactly. So Christofias, who I mentioned earlier, who'd been negotiating with Akinci, he's a communist. He's a Marxist-Leninist. He was the general secretary of so it's not called the Communist Party of Cyprus, which would have the very unfortunate acronym in Greek KKK. It's called Agel, which means the Progressive Party of Working People. Much better.
Awareness is hilarious. I remember reading that, and
we're taking it back.
I didn't know if it was true or not. And I'm a huge George Michael fan, probably.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that, and I watched there's a mediocre documentary about him, but he does have these leftist leanings whenever he's in a when he was passed away. especially when it came to certain rights of people. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I wonder if that was true. And you're telling me that it is true. So he really was funneling money through to the party as he got.
Yeah. So he in the UK, he was a member of the Young Communist League, the youth wing of the old Communist Party of Great Britain. And even after all of that, like I know from friends who've been very involved in the anti-fascist movement, like the militant part of the anti-fascist movement, that George was a big supporter under the table of militant anti-fascists in the London scene, like absolute legend.
Well, rock on.
Nick, do you want to go through kind of the months leading up to the attempted annexation by the junta and then the Turkish invasion and how that kind of all came out?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, what you had is after the Second World War, you had the start of an armed campaign for liberation. But unlike elsewhere in the colonial world, that was actually led by the right wing, not by the left. Grivas, Colonel Grivas, who started that, had spent the war in Greece, organizing a group called Chi, the Greek letter Chi, who were ultra monarchist fascists and who spent the entire war killing communists in Greece. He then went back and started the armed movement EOKA, which wasn't entirely fascist, but was mostly nationalist. There were a few leftists there, but was mostly nationalists. And what they were fighting for was union with Greece. This was always their long-term vision. And they had some connections with the church, because the church still had a very important institutional role that comes out of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire had a system called the millet system, which is the sort of government of communities by their religious authorities. And so that was literally called the ethnarchy. And that existed under the British.
The church was especially strong and autonomous in Cyprus, right, compared to other places.
Yeah, you have the archbishop, and so they were supporting, but under the table supporting it. At the same time, you had the communist movement led by Agel. You had the leftists, and they also had the trade unions, and they were organizing for independence. But eventually, in the 50s, they no longer supported the idea of union with Greece. Earlier, they'd played with this, but that was also with the potential of a communist Greece, that they thought that they might want union. But as they started to explicitly reach out to the other communities in Cyprus, and there was a wave of anti-communist and anti-bicommunal, in fact, murders that EOKA committed in around May Day in 1958. So what happened is in 1960, the British state, the Greek state, and the Turkish state got together and created the Treaty for Cyprus's independence. So you'll note there, not a single Cypriot organization was involved. This was the three states, the colonial power, and the two mother states of the main communities, as they claimed it, got together and said Cyprus is going to be independent. At this point, all three of them are also in NATO, so it's really important for Cold War politics that they don't come to blows. Cyprus is going to be independent. It's going to have these sovereign bases, and they are the three guarantor powers. So what that means is, if any one of them try to interfere internally in Cyprus, then the other two have both the right and the responsibility to intervene and to return the constitutional norms there. And what they gave as the constitutional norms was essentially an unworkable interethnic system, like just like we see in Bosnia-Herzegovina, like these intercommunal conflicts that are created by imperialism. When imperialism tries to create a solution, it essentially fossilizes all these identities.
Yeah, and it completely reifies the system, right?
Exactly. It means that your being Greek suddenly becomes the most important political fact about your existence. It's no longer about you as a worker or you as a colonial subject, but it's you as a Greek, and you have opposed interests that need to be balanced in the system. And that very quickly broke down. In 1963, 1964, there was a lot of communal violence, by Greek fascists, by Greek nationalists, that essentially created a bunch of Turkish enclaves. And there were a lot of massacres and crimes committed by Greek nationalists at this point. And the constitutional order broke down, and you had Greek majority rule in most of the island from that point up until 1974. And you also then had these Turkish enclaves that were essentially under siege, that were controlled by TMT, which was the Turkish nationalist, Turkish fascist movement, which was arguing already at that point for partition, as were the imperial powers. In the first proposal for the partition of Cyprus was drafted by the US and the UK in 1964.
Professor Nick, I want to ask you.
4 years again.
In light of this really interesting fact that you're talking about, there's something, as someone who has politics I consider the left, I am on the left as you are as well. I often ponder about the capacity of our dialectical materialist politics lacking an ability to penetrate countries and societies that have a strong connection to cultural continuity, if you will, and the tendency, the perceived tendency of Marxists or those within the Marxian perspective, or those who are dialectical materialists, whatever term you choose to use, to really have a strong blind spot for culture in the eyes of our critics. Do you think that critique is totally unfounded? And can you see how in a space like Cyprus, where there's a rich cultural history here, you have the Greek Orthodox Church, you have the Muslim community, you have language, all types of cultural manifestations, art, music, intellectual traditions. Do you find that there is some merit to the critique that we, as Marxist proximate dialectical materialists, have an incapacity to penetrate proletarians, the working people, the real people, because we have a kind of cultural bankruptcy in our analysis? I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So I think in the good tradition of dialectics, the answer is yes and no. Like it's definitely true. You can look at loads of movements across the global south, from the Shining Path to the older some of the older perspectives of the PKK and the Kurdistan Freedom Movement, to the rest of the Middle East. Like that, I've been asked by in Arab majority countries in the Middle East, like, are you a Christian, are you a Muslim, or are you a communist? Because this is like a third different thing, that you couldn't be both a Christian and Muslim, or a Muslim and a communist. Like it's perceived as coming along with its own perspectives that completely negate that. So I think yes, and you like what the Shining Path did with the indigenous communities in Peru is a really shocking example, or the Khmer Rouge as well in Cambodia. But at the same time, the fact that I can name all those examples shows just how deeply rooted Marxism, Leninism, revolutionary politics, communist politics was and still is in a lot of the parts of the world that now people say these things more about. It's like, oh, we need to take stock of the culture and be able to include that into the politics. So I think that's a contradictory situation, and I think that contradiction is one that the Kurdistan Freedom Movement is taking really interesting steps to address. Part of the new paradigm from the 90s, from the older Marxism-Leninism into this more libertarian socialist politics, was also a recognition of the necessity of culture and the potentials in all popular culture for liberation, for developing a revolutionary good sense. I'm a big reader of Gramsci, and finding in people's vernacular good sense the ways in which they're already tending towards a revolutionary perspective. So I think that's been a historic failing, but I don't think that it's always been the case. Also, the Zapatistas are a perfect example of how you can create a beautiful marriage between cultural beliefs, cultural life worlds, and a fiercely revolutionary politics. In Cyprus, I don't think that's been the problem so much. I think and in Turkey and Greece as well, the communist politics has been is incredibly strong in Greece and in Turkey. I think there the issue has more been how to deal with the legacies of really fossilized, rarefied, objectified national identities that have been created by imperialism and taken on really strongly by the new elites in each of those states. Especially in Turkey, that's a big issue, but also in Greece, also in Cyprus. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but it's kind of yes and no.
So you think that there's some truth to it, but you think that also it's not a problem that cannot be surmounted.
Exactly. I think like it's going to be impossible to surmount if your revolutionary politics is a kind of fossilized Marxism-Leninism.
I love that phrase. Say it again for the people in the back. Beautiful.
Fossilized Marxism-Leninism.
Beautiful phrasing.
Like I'm not. Just to say, there are so many amazing examples of Marxist-Leninist movements across history and organizations today, but I think some of the really reductive versions of it that only read the first half of the sentence that said religion is the opiate of the masses and never read the second half of the same sentences that say it's the sigh of the oppressed creature. Right. Then it's going to be impossible to surmount. But yeah, I think there's lots of good examples. Also, the Philippines and the Naxalites in South Asia, those Marxist-Leninist Maoist movements have taken real steps to recognize the fact.
Well, shout out to Chairman Mao. Shout out to Amilcar Cabral. And shout out to.
Did you just snap? Did you just do the snap thing? Did you just woke snap us?
I was about to say,
hey, George Michael did it. He could do it.
God damn.
But also, this is 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We got 2 weeks in a row. We got a shout out for the left campaign in the Philippines. So,
it doesn't get a lot of, in all fairness to Esperanza bringing that up, the Philippines does not get a lot of credit for any sort of leftist movement.
Aren't they big in California?
Filipinos? All my kids
are like the Filipino communists.
No, really, all my kids are Filipino.
And they're all Filipino communists. No, who knows?
But also, guys, I'm going to be boring. Let's get the rest of the history down.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we got to 1964. No. Can you take us to 1974?
1964, the constitutional order breaks down, and you have the president of Cyprus, who is Archbishop Makarios. So there's the extent of continuity. You have the Ottoman millet system, where the church is the governor of the Greek Christian community. Then you have the ethnarchy under the British, where again the church is in power. And then the first president, and in fact the only president of the United Island of Cyprus, is Archbishop Makarios. And he eventually, he's still originally a believer in union with Greece, but eventually by the late 60s, he recognizes that it's not going to happen and starts to try and find a different politics for an independent Cyprus. And he starts to actually get closer to the communists, to Agel and the leftist movement, and starts to try to position Cyprus in the non-aligned movement. And obviously, these are all massive warning signs for the NATO imperialists. At this point in the late 60s, Britain is looking the UK is looking to pull back all of its colonial commitments, and there are now, because we're far enough away, there are documents, memos that we can read where essentially it's the US insisting that that the UK stays and keeps these bases, because obviously there's also competition with the wider Middle East. You have Nasser in Egypt, you have the 67 war, and the whole situation with the Palestinian liberation movement. So Cyprus is now really geopolitically important. Makarios starts to try also to arm the Cypriot National Guard, and he's going to Eastern Bloc countries to get those weapons. And it reaches a point where, kind of hilariously, because he's still an archbishop, right? But gets to a point where Kissinger says that there's a danger of him being a Castro in the Mediterranean. Now, like, the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church of Cyprus is somehow now Fidel. They both have great beards, but other than that, I think the comparison's a little bit off. But at the same time, you have a massive ramping up of Greek nationalist agitation for union with Greece. And this is because that same organization, EOKA, which stands for the National Organization of Cypriot Fighters, is refounded, again by Grivas. But EOKA Vita is a very explicitly fascist organization. It's solely fascist and nationalist, and they start targeting Cypriot leftists as much as they're targeting, well, really they're concentrating on the left. And this is at the same time, in 67 again, so from 67 to 74, that you have the colonels taking over in Greece. And again, the background to all of this is NATO positioning and the Cold War. And it starts to really come to a head around 73 and 74. Now, there's two stories. One is the undeniable one, which is that EOKA Vita, these fascists, in collaboration with the junta in Greece, organize a coup in early July, to unite Cyprus, to get rid of Makarios. They try to kill him, but it's unsuccessful. He escapes, and there's this amazing moment where he speaks. He gives a message across the radio to say, "I am alive," and the resistance is bolstered, and the coup collapses very quickly after a few days. But ostensibly, what they're trying to do is to take over the island and to formally unite with Greece. And in response, the Turkish state invades in a very small area initially, around a place called Girenia or Girne in Turkish. And they take that, and between the Turkish invasion and the resistance, the coup collapses, and Makarios returns, and I'll just pause there. What almost certainly is the background to this, though, is an agreement to partition the island between the Turkish state, the colonels in Greece, and with US mediation. There's a memo that survives from Kissinger, may he burn in hell one day, where he says, according to US interests, according to his realpolitik doctrines, there's no reason why Turkey shouldn't have a third of the island. So I'm convinced, the left in Cyprus is also convinced, that Agel and those to the left of Agel too, that this was an orchestrated plan that went wrong because Makarios refused it and because there was such strong resistance to it. And the reason why this seems to have been an agreed plan is because, if you remember, I said initially Turkey only takes a very small section of the island. It's only around Girenia. They have a little beachhead. And then there are negotiations from July until August. So there's 3 months and there's negotiations ongoing, all at the same time as Watergate, by the way. So it's a pretty intense time, and they're not getting a lot of communication from the US state. But then in August, the Turkish state leaves these negotiations and has a second invasion where they expand across the island. All the British troops stay in their bases. They are held in their barracks. And the contact line that still exists to this day is established with huge loss of life, like proportionally to the country, to the population. Firstly, half the population becomes refugees in the aftermath of this second invasion. And the same, proportionally to the total population, the same number of Cypriots die in this invasion as Americans died in the Second World War. So it's a large amount of people who are killed here, because this north-south divide is completely artificial. It was never like that there were more Muslims in the north. There were lots of Muslim communities in the south, lots of Greek communities.
And those deaths are Turkey killing resistant members killing Turkish soldiers, or intercommunal violence, or Turkish.
It's the Turkish state killing resistance fighters, and there are still lots of communities that are left behind each of these lines. But basically, following that invasion, what they do is a smaller version on a smaller scale, exactly what had happened between Greece and Turkey after the First World War. They exchange the populations, buses are exchanged, and now there's only about 500 families in the village that my family's from, in the very north of Cyprus, that are Greek speaking, and there's still a relatively strong community there. And there's one village literally within the green zone that separates the two, which is both Turkish and Greek and administered by the UN. But otherwise,
because the kind of the border strip or the demilitarized zone, wherever it's meant to be, is relatively thick, and it's quite a small island, right?
Yeah.
So in proportion of land area, this kind of DMZ is quite large.
Yeah, it's really large, and it includes whole cities like Famagusta, which now Erdogan is trying to open up against all the UN subsequent UN what's the word when they pass something that they're so ineffective.
Resolutions or
oh yeah. Those
yeah. All the UN resolutions, he's going against those now and starting to open it up. But it's a complete ghost town, and some of the photos from there are just incredible, because you see this old 60s and 70s tourist infrastructure. Famagusta was the home of tourism in the 60s and the early 70s. And it's a complete ghost town now.
That's also interesting, especially because if you go to the south, it feels like every building there was built in like the last 10 years, or it's still being built right now.
Yeah, there's a huge boom.
So is it safe to say that Cyprus's economic boom is a consequence of a logistical proximity to other larger countries or economies that, because of their own internal strifes, basically have used Cyprus as an economic dumping ground for capital in the face of their collapse?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's a recent scandal demonstrates that perfectly. It's called the Golden Passport Scandal. And essentially what the Republic of Cyprus administration was doing was just selling passports to oligarchs. So there's so much Russian money in particular, and Russian oligarchs getting EU passports by buying Cypriot ones.
There's actually an article I was reading before the show about how the current Russia-Ukraine crisis is causing potential economic problems for Cyprus, because the Russian oligarchs are kind of being demanded by the EU and the Eurozone to get the boot. And a lot of people are looking at that potentiality of that causing major problems. Shout out to Boris in Great Britain feeling the same pressure as well. Because everyone's telling him that his oligarchs need to stop funding.
Known Turk, Boris Johnson,
his private schools. But it's interesting to see how this is all playing out in the current juncture. It's kind of like a not Taiwan, but what's the name of the Asian country everyone thinks is so rich right off the border of China, who's really just a dumping ground?
Hong Kong.
Starts with S.
Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore is a country that some kind of economic miracle. The only reason Singapore exists because they need a place to dump money to capture the communist Chinese market, because communist China is obviously not going to be that spot. So Singapore, which a lot of morons think is a capitalist country, has the same socialist or state capitalist economic paradigm as China. That 85 to 90% of the land is owned by the state, and something like 40% of the market in the stock market is owned by the government as well. So it's always fascinating how these like imbecilic capitalists look at these various countries as some kind of like, oh, this is a modern example of how capitalism works.
Exactly.
These Thomas Sowell-like droning idiots, without actually doing a larger kind of macro analysis of like, dude, the actual model that they use is like China. And the only reason they're doing well is because they're like,
Well,
basically
Pascal, what you're ignoring,
Bain Capital's dumping ground in the Pacific.
what you're ignoring is that everything good that happens in China is because of capitalism, and everything bad that happens in China is because of communism. And they have no problem believing that that can exist.
No, it's really kind of, I mean, it's really annoying to find the degree to which people will tell you that simply because you are a socialist who believes in some type of trade or commerce, that you're actually a capitalist. And I'm like, you realize that there are types of socialism that allow trade, commerce, and even some types of markets. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I digress, and I appreciate
Nick. Do you have to leave soon?
Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
Yeah, I think like with all these situations with Singapore and with Cyprus, it shows just how like skin deep the capitalist development is. That it's completely dependent on the configuration of especially finance capital in the world system in that moment. And it's not a coincidence that all of these were like was mentioned earlier, like little bases like Singapore, Hong Kong, Cyprus, little bases that were also merchant capital bases that then became finance capital bases. And so with Cyprus, also the other thing it really shows is just how much GDP hides, because the youth, everyone is leaving Cyprus. Like there are no prospects there. There's a huge brain drain of people moving away because you can't get a job unless it's in tourist industry or in some finance. But if you look at GDP, it looks incredibly healthy.
But I'm assuming the tourist industry is
very
exploitative.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, the tourist industry is actually significantly staffed by the sort of semi-peripheries within the EU. So lots of Bulgarian migrant workers are there, generally Balkan migrant workers.
There's always a poorer migrant.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have to leave at 6, Nick?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I need to leave at 6 because this weekend is Newroz, which is the Kurdish New Year, and it's the first one since the pandemic hit that we can go to the community centre, sing revolutionary songs, have all the food, and I'm gonna have to catch up there.
On that basis, Nick, can I offer you 2 questions, and in the celebration of Newroz, you get to choose which one you'd prefer to answer. Either to go through kind of the attempts at reunification, or a question I really wanted to ask and have answered, which is to kind of compare Turkey's strategy of neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism with its neighbors and its kind of these ethnic republics to Russia, who's doing something very similar. And obviously placing that in the context of the invasion of Syria and the invasion of Ukraine.
So yeah, the second one definitely is that's something that I think about a lot. So I think in a broader, like thinking in terms of the development of the capitalist world system, I'm big. I take a lot of inspiration from Wallerstein's thinking, from world systems analysis in general. I'm pretty convinced of the perspective that around 68, with that world revolutionary moment, from the Cultural Revolution to the May events in France, that the modern world system, the capitalist world system, starts to experience a systemic crisis that it's not going to be able to overcome. And that's why suddenly no longer a right and left, basically, at least institutional rights and lefts, basically variations on reformist liberalism, but you start to get the neoliberal counter-revolution and you get real radical revolutionary movements across the 70s.
You sound like you've been watching our show for years.
And so Cyprus, the crisis happens in the midst of that moment. 74 is in the middle of it. And I think for the Turkish state in particular, but also for the regional powers in general, including Russia, including the Russian state, it sets up a model. Because the Cypriot operation is the first time that the Turkish state has a military operation outside of its borders since its founding in 1923. There were lots of military operations within its borders against Kurds and against Alevis, the Dersim genocide. So there's a history of militarized racist colonialism internally to Turkey, but it's the first time it's externalized. And the model of taking a small territory, settling it, and that's one of the big sticking points actually in terms of finding a solution, is what you do now, because Turkish Cypriots in the north are a minority. The majority of people in the north are descendants of people who were settled there, and the way this works with colonialism as well is just like it's a really clear example, because my ancestral village in the north, Wrzesniewski, is now a majority Kurdish village, Kurdish town.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing. Like my comrades here, I met them. They said, "Oh, where from?" Blah, blah, blah. I said, Wrzesniewski. Said, "That's where I grew up," because they were taken from Kurdistan and settled there. And so that's a double refugee, right? They're both expelled and they're settled. And so that makes them complicit in a way that like aligns them with the program. It's exactly what's happened in Afrin and in northern Syria.
And in the Russian Empire, this is what happened with Ukrainians who were settled in the Far East.
Exactly. It's what the Russian state is now doing. Also with the Ossetians, what it was doing in Georgia, they're finding these populations and instrumentalizing their very real trauma, and to use them as a settler colonialist project, which to my mind means you have to think who's a refugee and what is a settler and what would a solution actually look like. For me, I believe very, very strongly that no solution should have any provisions, no solution that we as revolutionaries could give that name, should have any even voluntary return. People have the right to live there. The red line should be our right to return, our right to live somewhere. How the property works, communist, so I don't really care about that. Like but the right to live wherever you want to live. But in terms of this model in Afrin, now you're seeing an emerging Turkish Republic of Northern Syria. And they're changing names, they're introducing Turkification, and they're weaponizing the very real trauma of Syrian Arab, mainly refugees who fled the destruction of their revolution into Turkey, being settled, being used to have demographic engineering there. And I think one thing that's really clear in the thread that runs from Cyprus to these operations in northern Syria and then into the Russian imperialist invasion of Ukraine is the term they use. They're all peace operations. They refuse the word invasion.
Lethal aid.
Although the internal name, the internal code name that the Turkish state used for the Cyprus operation was Operation Attila, which is a very different kind of message. They referred to it as a peace operation. The same in northern Syria, and the same that you see now. This is the demilitarization campaign that the Russians are implementing, and I think all of them are symptoms of this broader global systemic crisis. It's the steady chipping away of those norms that US hegemony had put in place, and the creation of just facts on the ground. And in the case of the Turkish state, what's been very galling, watching in the last few weeks, is that it's all been done without anyone saying anything. The Turkish state can trade wherever they want. They can do whatever they want. They're fully part of the global system still, despite having done exactly what the Russian state is doing.
I mean, it's very interesting, right? That Turkey can do this stuff because they are kind of like NATO's problem child. And you feel like if Russia had joined NATO in 2000 or whatever, they'd be able to get away with actually way more shit than they did. That NATO is not like a peace alliance in this way, but in fact it enables kinds of its peripheral members to do
you just need to be, you need to be using NATO weapons. That's the point.
Exactly.
Well, Nick, we know it's late for you and you have somewhere to go. You have a celebration. I hope you guys listen to much George Michael.
Yes.
In your celebration. Thank you for clearing that up for me. You totally made him even a higher iconic figure in my life.
I'll send a photo that I've got saved somewhere of him wearing his Mao cap with a red star, looking like he does in Wham. Like Wham era George Michael with a full-on Chairman Mao hat.
That's nuts. You know why that's nuts to me? Because you think of all the bands that have postured as revolutionary and what we think of like these like Crass, and I'm sure I don't know if you're a punk guy, Dead Kennedys and stuff like that. Yeah. And nothing they have done can get to that level of
not at all
funding.
Yeah, exactly.
Revolutionary
material support for militant anti-fascism.
I'm just happy that they're like musical references that I can like literally just like commie seed my family, my like old boomer family members with. So
now all those Wham songs like Freedom just take on a whole nother meaning.
Exactly.
So different. Yeah.
And that's why you've always got to have faith in the revolution.
Well, father figure was him damning fucking demagogic figures that lead us down the wrong path. Oh yeah, George Michael, fucking. You just changed all of music right now, Nick. So Nick, have fun at your
You
party.
gonna be hanging out with Kurds, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to see my Kurdish friends.
What's the word? The Kurd up. It's the code word.
And plenty of Turks, I'm sure too.
Yeah. Turkish leftists. It's like North London. When we get to host you guys over here, you'll come and you'll see. It's just a little bit of the region transported up here.
Oh, is Djene coming out? I didn't know you were in the UK. For some reason, I thought you were in. Oh, because I read.
Yeah. I'm in North London. I mean, there's as many Cypriots in North London as in Cyprus at this point. So I know him a bit through that, and also as historians. And yeah, gonna go celebrate Kurdish New Year, sing revolutionary songs with all my Turkish, Kurdish, Cypriot comrades.
Well, enjoy yourself. Thank you again for
thank you so much for having me.
We really appreciate you and all you added. So
I guess Nick would refuse his categorization, but I want to do a lot more Greek episodes now. I love talking about the Greek world.
Bye. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Cheers, guys.
All right, Mike.
Really appreciate that episode, and sorry guys, my camera had died. That's why I was gone from the screen.
Oh right, that was funny when it was just the fucking album cover was you.
I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh yeah, my camera is my phone, and it died.
Mm-hmm.
That was a dope episode. I did not know all that about Cyprus. Again, like I said, I was reading the wrong guy's work, and I was like, why do we have to read about turn of the century? Like it was like, what was he writing about?
It's wrong. You're reading the wrong author.
It was the wrong author. He was Armenian.
In the wrong time. Like it's just all wrong.
It was so wrong. I was like, Djene, isn't this guy like 55? Djene's like, no, he's like fucking 32.
Although that mustache is every bit of 55.
The mustache wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. You know, I thought he was going to have one of those bicycle mustaches. Like,
I think the mustache was in the style of Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Kurdish freedom movement.
Mm.
Oh, really?
Very curious though, if like he's got like just a long upper lip. You know, some people.
Stefan,
got
can you
face.
grow a mustache?
Oh yeah, very. My facial hair grows very, very fast.
Are you like Kuba, where Kuba's facial hair grows mid-show?
Okay, I don't think I'm that powerful.
Kuba had 5 o'clock shadow in the champagne room.
Guys, I've got a busy day today. In 2 hours, I'm going to start streaming on the Sublation Media channel. Of course.
Am I supposed to share this picture you just sent? That's so fucked up.
What are you saying about Öcalan? That is his most kind of like Mario style photo.
So I want you to see this picture, guys, and I want you to just hear this guy say,
I don't think this picture is going to breed much sympathy for the Kurdish freedom movement.
It's me, Wario.
I think it's going to...
No, I'm about that life. I like that, his mustache looks like the Batman symbol. And then the eyebrows, they've got the fucking exclamation points in each of them. I like this. I need to figure out how to make this happen on my face.
Is this the cat that's real pro? Oh God, Mao?
No, not really. The PKK was like Stalin, Marxist, Leninist. He was accused of being like another mini Stalin. That's
what it was. Well, he's kind of got the fit.
But he's been in prison since 1998.
You know who I got him confused with? You're gonna hate me for this, and I apologize. I got him confused with the Shining Path dude.
The guy, he just died, didn't he?
Now that cat was nuts. He was the one that put his picture up. You know how there's a picture of like Marx, Lenin, and Stalin, and he put his picture up there.
We're gonna upset approximately one person by our first reference to the Shining Path on the show being just kissing it.
What'd you say?
We're gonna make exactly one person angry by dissing the Shining Path.
Well, you know what's funny about Shining Path and people's relation to like anything communist is great. Rage Against the Machine had a video with Shining Path in it. They were like all about Shining Path for like 5 minutes, and now they kind of act like that never happened. Like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Yeah, we weren't all about this life.
Listen, yeah, like everyone gets a fucking mulligan, all right? The fuck are you talking about? I never did that. It's like, no, we've got it on video, and you're just like, I don't see anything.
You did a literal video showing Shining Path soldiers.
I don't see anything. You must have something wrong with the encryption.
Yes. That dude died in September. So says my behind the scenes producer that likes to text in the middle of the show.
Who's that?
I'm not telling you.
She's your producer? Like she produces for you?
Wow, how you know it's a she? How you know it's not a they?
I didn't know. I just said that and you confirmed it.
Now you bring that up. You're bringing up the gender thing to try and deflect. Who is it?
I don't know what you just sent me, Stefan, but that's interesting.
What the hell?
I just wanted you to post the Twitch in the chat.
Oh. So Stefan is about to go on our good friend Doug Lane's Sublation Media.
I'm on it more than him, so I think it's my channel.
Well, I also want to let everyone know that I am still putting together a live presentation for the I also wanted to say opening party, but it's not the I almost said coming out party, but it's not that. Right. What would you call it? Housewarming?
Prom?
A media housewarming, a debutante ball of leftismness in Southern California in April. I believe we have a date set. When I get that confirmation, hopefully this weekend I'll have that confirmation, then we can talk more about it, and we'll have like little flyers made for who's all going to be there. But there's definitely, I talked about with Doug again, we're going to have the Trotsky-Stalin debate, which I'm kind of excited to watch. Dylan Rodriguez is going to be in the place, so it's going to be a good time. There's a few more people that need to confirm, and then I can tell you. They said, Jason, hit 10K so we can do a live meet and greet in Mexico. I will never do a live meet and greet in Mexico because I am terrified of you people.
Yeah, Jason doesn't
You know
want
what
to
these
get
folks? You know what
killed.
these folks? You know where he lives. I don't blame him.
Like, I'm terrified after the shit that I got sent to me. But I will do
Nobody
it.
here knows my last name, and I can't like, cause it's not because I don't trust them, but if anybody coming after me kidnaps y'all, I can't trust you to deal with the fucking waterboarding. Okay? I think Jason's capacity for pain is very small. So no, like this is like we just can't. Someone wants to wear our skin. They're out there. They're not gonna find us.
Like, shit changed for me as far as like who shit changed for me because of that shit. It really fucked me up. But we are doing something in Southern California, and for this show, This is Revolution, we're going to be doing more things because I did hook up with my booking agent, and I was talking with my old booking agent, and I was talking with David Griscom about doing some crossover show shit kind of throughout the country. So I'm really excited for that. Pascal has actually been, getting fit and in shape, not just here, but also here.
Word, mad dieting.
Jason does not live in a gated community. There is a gate, but there is not a gated community. But a lot of people here have guns.
Because you're not friends with each other. It's just the gate.
Yeah. That's so. Well, I told this story, and I'll leave you guys with this. I told this story on the Beyond the Red Zone. Every other Monday on This is Revolution Beyond the Red Zone, leftist sports show hosted by Marcus. So I was here for New Year's, and there was no fireworks. And where I'm from, New Year's, 4th of July, motherfuckers just light fireworks. And because I don't know if you guys read about it, in LA, there was a huge, they caught a ring of illegal fireworks or coming from actually down here. So super crazy loud, more loud than I've ever heard in my life, were going off this past year in Oakland, right? And so when I got here, I was here for New Year's here in Mexico, and it was quiet. Couldn't hear a fucking thing, right? It was awesome. It was beautiful. So the other night, I hear pop. It's like, is that a firework? And then I hear pop, pop. I was like, shit, I think those are guns. And so I text my neighbor that lives in front, and I text the guy that lives next door. I'm like, is them gunshots? And then all of a sudden, this guy quiet's like, pop, pop, pop. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Because fireworks, cats that got fireworks, and I'm sure this is even true for where you grew up, Stefan. If kids got fireworks, they're letting that shit off. Here, I'm lighting everyone until I don't have them anymore, and that's what I'm gonna do. So it wasn't that. And gunshots for me always sounded like, so I'm like, and I live off a dirt road, so I'm like, what the fuck is this noise? This is gunshots. So I start fucking turning out lights and shit. And I don't have a gun. I got a machete, so I got my machete ready because I'm like, mother. So also, I locked my keys in my house the other day. I needed to be in. And so one of the workers, the owner, is getting some work done to the unit next door, and the worker busted in my house in less than 2 minutes. And they opened up the window, jumped in, opened the door. I was like, fuck, I have no security. So I'm sitting there trying to be like chill as fuck, right? Like, I don't know what's going on outside. So I go to this burger spot the next day, and my neighbor happens to be at the burger spot too. And we look at each other, and I'm like, bruh, what was that last night? And he laughs at me. And he goes, oh, well, you can't see, huh? And I was like, no, because my unit faces the ocean. And it was going on in front of me in the field. And he goes, oh, that was just a guy. He goes, actually, it's another black man that lives in the area. He goes, and typical white guys, you should meet him. You'd like him. And he goes, fireworks. And I said, man, it didn't sound like fireworks. He goes, yeah. And this white guy happens to be from the Bay too. He goes, yeah, you probably thought if fireworks would just go off. I was like, yeah. And then the white guy, and the dude that owns the burger spot both look at me very serious, and they go, oh, out here, when you hear gunshots, there's just one, and then nothing else.
Like, that line belongs in a movie. That's a line in a movie.
And I was like, what? They were like, oh yeah, you just hear one and that's it. Because
the end of the day. That's finishing the job.
Yeah,
Bullets are expensive.
Bullets. Hey, we don't fuck around here. Like you hear one and that's it. And when I first got here, my neighbor actually was explaining to me like, oh, this guy down the street probably don't want to pay too much attention to that house. I'm like, thanks for letting me know. That's what I thought it was. I was like, oh fuck, what's going on? But no, you hear one and that's it. I thought that was fucking hilarious and scary all at the same time. That being said, it did remind me not to complain when there's horse shit in the park and I have to run around it. Like that's there's horse shit in the park. I'm not going to be like, hey, pick up your horse shit. I'll be like, that horse looks like he's eating well.
It made me think like how many lives are saved in the US because people are like, don't train marksmanship. And don't hit shit and then drive away. You know?
See, and this is the thing, and like we don't need to go off on this shit, but there's like this, like that is such a true fucking thing, and even like the Marine Corps, like, oh, every Marine's a rifleman. And I was like, no, you got like little riflemen who can't shoot for shit, you know, like everything available to them. You got range hours, you get the fucking scopes and all this shit, and like doesn't matter as soon as like it's. So accuracy by volume is something that the United States is mostly against.
You know, I never missed a shot with a Dragunov sniper rifle, but I only got to 5'10". So
yeah, exactly. Keep the numbers low. Yeah.
A Turkish communist I knew in Syria, he had to flee to Syria because he was like in a confrontation with the police and they were trying to arrest him. So he pulled like an automatic Glock out and just like held down the trigger and just hit absolutely nothing, but scared the cop long enough that he ran away and escaped.
Yes. Like that is the important thing too, is that like sometimes like you don't need to hit him. You don't need to hit him. And that's actually too is like the most usefulness for like the first actual firearms was scare. Like it just scared people. They weren't actually good at like hitting the enemy, but it was just a new scary thing that literally made people like shit their pants and run away. And like that's sometimes that helps, right? Like where suppression fire. That's what they call it.
Another reason that a friend of mine went to Syria. My friend Nurhak, who's dead now, he in his town there was a Burger King, and Syrian refugees were like picking shit out of the dumpster, and the manager took one of these Syrian refugees and like beat him up. So Nurhak went the next day at night and just went with like a metal post and just destroyed the entire Burger King, and then had to leave Turkey.
Fuck. I don't have a firearm because I'm too stupid to have a firearm. Like I will use it and I don't need it.
I know that I'm not going to do anything good with a gun anytime soon.
Yeah.
So like
I want a gun.
I would have went out there with a gun shooting a dude with a firecracker.
Yo, Marcus, can I ask you a personal question? Like for real?
Yeah.
Do you have like after like I'm not trying to be like serious. I'm trying to be sensitive. After serving in the military in a war zone, do you have like issues with weapons? Like you don't want to fuck with them. Like get this shit away from me.
Like yeah, you know, I do have an aversion to this like gun culture. Like it is like that because most people don't actually have an understanding of like this is a weapon, you know. And it's not like a knife where you cut your fucking carrots with it, you know? Like, this thing only has one use, to take life.
People.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, and that's the thing, too, is, like, not just, like, watching people get, I mean, fuck, like, I know people who've got accidentally shot, you know? That's not fun either. You know, like, there's just no way around, like, oh, hey, you know, like, this is just an accident or whatever the fuck. Like, so, no, that's something where part of it is just like an understanding where like, especially just coming out of the military and going, you know, like I went through a divorce and like where there was a conscious, you know, I don't want to have a gun because, I might do something bad with it. But now it's, I don't feel comfortable because there's also a lot of just like civilian side, like just bullshit that goes around, like even like trying to train with guns, people always want to go to the range and think they're fucking Rambo. But then, at the same time too, is like, there's really, there's nothing going to be good done with a gun anytime soon with, so I don't need to. And
Well,
I'm also banking on it. If anything happened, it'd be like riding a bike. That's what I'm hoping for, but who knows?
There's a video I just recently watched of a gun safety class, and the dude is like, okay, you got to hold your arms like this and fire and he fires the gun and cracks himself in the face.
Yeah.
Nice.
As it's shooting.
Yeah.
And everybody in the class starts like, they're like, what? They're like, did you mean to do that? And he goes, yeah.
Yeah. Just to show you.
It shows I haven't seen Ungrimmer properly.
Yeah. And I'll say that though, they're good, like the Socialist Rifle Association. I think they actually do a pretty good job of like vetting people and having like making sure that like they're not just like, oh hey, come on, let's fucking start the fucking armed revolution today. Like I've seen a lot of good, good practices. But yeah, you couldn't fucking drag me into a gun range in the United States. Just couldn't do it.
Born Center asks, it the black swole dude with the texturizer? No, it's another one. It's a white guy, but the black swole dude is the best gun. Have you seen that video where have you ever seen that stuff on this black dude? He's buff as fuck. He's giving a gun safety course and he's talking about safety. And I think the safety's off and he doesn't realize the safety's off. And he shoots himself in the foot in the middle of the class.
Yeah.
The best thing about the Kalashnikov is like the safety is like this massive bit of steel. Which you just like, there's no chance you're ever confused if it's on or off. While I had like also handled like a Glock, and the safety is like a little tiny plastic thing at the back of the fucking thing, which you could just easily knock away. But yeah, AK-47, 74, whatever, safest, best gun in the world.
Russian engineering, baby.
Yeah.
Like the small, and also I've disassembled and reassembled like a civilian AR. And there's so many tiny fucking fiddly pieces. The smallest piece of the AK is the firing pin, which is still like this big. It's like 3 inches long.
I found the video, and the black guy is a DEA agent, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and this is like, Stefan, this is the issue though, is that like usefulness, simplicity, these are not things that go into the military calculus of the United States. Like lowest bidder that has connection to highest member in the Senate. That's how these things kind of overlap.
I want you guys to Stefan and Marcus, check this out.
But even if the safety's off, there should be no point where you'll pull the trigger.
I have one on my side right here. Just this week, at the beginning of the week, a young boy, not even 16 years old, was killed because he was playing with a gun. And see, this is an unloaded gun. Right here, this is the stuff. No, empty weapon. Empty weapon. This is a Glock 40. 50 Cent, Too Short, all of them talk about Glock 40. Okay, I'm the only one in this room professional enough that I know of to carry this Glock 40. I'm the only
Oh, these motherfuckers.
I mean, but also what happened there is
everybody all right?
His boy did it.
Nigga, you all right?
Like he asked the guy who's passing it to him, like, is this a safe? Is this an empty weapon? Well, the guy said yes, and it wasn't. Obviously, he still shouldn't have done that. But like, he got fucked by his boy there.
This is where it's just bad on all accounts. All accounts.
A room full of fucking idiots.
That's it. It's like equally and that's like it's all bad. It's all fucking bad.
All right. When he did that shit, I shouldn't laugh. I should not laugh. Man. But god damn, that's funny.
Yeah.
Damn, that's funny. It's not fun. It isn't funny, but it's God damn.
So, and Pascal, I'll say this to answer your question. Hopefully, it's like, is gunfire or guns, is that something that, like, puts me into a rage or debilitating fucking sadness? No, but having an understanding of what these things can do and the absolute idiocracy of even the people who call themselves masters, it makes me want to be no part of it whatsoever.
Marcus, I have one more thing to show you. Gun. Okay, there is. So when I get done with this show and I'm not reading anything for the show or working on something for the show, to get away from this shit, I've been watching fighting videos where people teach
about a month now. I don't know why.
What'd you say?
And sending them to me to traumatize my ass watching these shit.
So I did teach a little fighting shit for a while, and so I love these debunking videos about who's a fake martial artist. And there's this black dude from Detroit that teaches people how to do things that no one's ever going to be in a position to do. And one of them is like, okay, if someone has a gun to your chest, what you do is you grab the gun.
Okay, martial arts versus a guy with a gun is always classic.
And he'll teach
He just relies on the guy not pulling the trigger at any point.
Like any first of all, I'm kind of on the fence about teaching people martial arts for self-defense. If you want to try to get some level of confidence, that's one thing. But like, everyone has a thing inside their head, and either you're going to really, like Stefan and Marcus know this, you're trained in combat to react. When you take a martial arts class, you're trained on how to do that thing.
I mean, it's like learning dancing
very
or
different
something.
than
They're not teaching you how to fight.
No. And so when you know how to fight, or good fighters, it's always different. There's professional fighters that get beat up all the time by street dudes because there's like, well, I didn't know he was going to throw that wild. Of course he didn't know he was going to throw a wild punch. He's not a real fighter. He's going to do crazy shit. He's going to pick up a brick and hit you with it. So there's this guy that teaches these courses on how to survive these situations. And there's one that is the funniest shit, and it's about like grabbing a gun and then putting your thumb on the hammer.
Oh my god.
So wait.
So first, when someone confronts you with a gun, you have to work out exactly how the mechanism works.
What to do if a striker-fired weapon is pinning against your chest against the wall, and a criminal is holding you.
Okay, here. I have to show you guys this because this is
striker-fired weapon.
This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, Kuba has the best defense. Throat balls.
If you spit a loogie in between the hammer and when it hits, then it's gonna stop the gunpowder. God, look at this dweeb.
This is revolution self-defense advice. If you're in a situation and someone has a gun that close to your chest, give them what they're asking for.
I was going to say the best defense in this case is to give them your wallet.
Give them what they're asking for. You can get it again. The last time I had a gun to my chest like that, he was a little further away, and he pointed a gun to me and he said, "Give me everything you got." And I said, no. And he kind of looked stunned. And then this homeless dude from the sidewalk was like, "Man, leave that nigga alone." And he's like, "Man, it's not a fucking game." And my brother was in the car. I got out of the car. My brother was in the car, and he was crying. My brother was trying to get all the change he had. And so I looked at my brother, and I was like, "Shit, man, this dude's going to end up fucking taking the car." And I looked at the dude, and I had my hands up, but I was like in a fighting stance. And I was like, "Hey, man." No, I didn't say man. I said, "Hey, nigga, I'm broke just like you." And he laughed. And as he laughed, I dove in the car and stepped on my brother's foot.
No, this is like, that's it. From here on out, as he was laughing, that's when you struck his hand on the outside, doing the kung fu grip on the slide of the weapon.
That was not
90 degrees to the outside. Yeah.
Man, I'd rather be in Syria than LA.
Bruh, real talk. In those situations, just look for a way out. I'm looking for a way out. I am not trying to figure out how I'm going to disarm you like this is a movie. That shit is not going to work out real well for me. Now, he may not even have had a real gun. He may have had these BB guns look real as fuck now. Real gun enthusiasts really hate real looking BB guns because people are getting fucked up over real looking BB guns. And he might have had that. I don't know. All I know is I was like,
Someone in chat was saying you should have just told him that you had a leftist podcast, and then you knew you into him.
Oh, you were poor. Oh, never mind. Do you want this gun to sell so you can eat something tonight?
I can give you some of the bullets. I only need like 2.
Wait a minute. I can't. You should. Oh,
that was Dusty 48.
Dusty 48. You should have told me to let this. Pascal doesn't find that as funny as we do.
Yeah, I love that this started out with Pascal. I was like, man, I love being on here and talk about the intellectual things that stimulate my mind. And now here we are about laughing about like getting robbed and shit.
We need a Greek episode.
Yeah.
We had a great episode. We got a great trigger warning out of realizing. There's one aspect I forgot to tell you guys about the trigger warning. So not only has the term coon got a new meaning, right? It's no longer kind of being a minstrel and reinforcing white stereotypes. It is your love for white women. So a coon is black man. Or?
I mean, people just use it to mean like race traitor. I mean, everything goes down to its most basic.
Who's saying this? Right? Who's doing this?
Who's cooning?
No, who's redefining cooning?
Yeah.
Everyone I see online using the word uses it to mean like race traitor or whatever.
I feel like coons redefine coons. But anyway, Terry Crews, the actor, Crews, he has his own definition. Do you know what it is, Pascal?
Himself?
No. Well, kind of. Terry Crews says, yes, I'm a coon. Conquer our own negativity.
Oh. This will save Black America.
So what we need more coons.
Oh my God.
We need more coons.
That's probably
too many of you people got your pants hanging low, different color face tattoos in your hair. You need to be a coon.
Oh, shit.
It is kind of highly ranked in the offensive things a black person can call another black person.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are worse.
I think people are saying coon. Oh, for fuck's sake, I was not going to say it. Instead of saying house N-word.
It doesn't resonate the same way.
It's kind of taken. People don't want to say that anymore.
I'll be very honest. I've never heard black folk in colloquial conversations amongst each other refer to another black person as a house Negro. They'll say cool. They'll say sellout.
Yeah.
Old school folk will say Uncle Tom, but no one says house Negro.
Comrade. So here's an interesting thing that happened. That's part of this conversation that I awoke to via email about coons. A gentleman is watching a Larry Wilmore show with his daughter. And in that show is a mumble rapper. Don't know the name. And the rapper, Larry Wilmore's like kind of taking the guy to task, like, hey, man, you say the N-word a lot. And the majority of people that go watch you are not N-words. They're white people. How would you then feel if said white person called you their N-word? And the black rapper goes, fine, cool. I think it's cool. I call my N-word back. Later in the conversation, sorry, my stomach. Later in the conversation, the black rapper gets upset over the fact that white people use emojis that are dark skinned.
Oh, the digital blackface.
You know what's so funny? Said
Digital
there's
blackface.
term. There's a term for that. It's not only a term. This I don't want to say movement. I wouldn't want to say. There's like a kind of internet Twitter discourse around this about white people using memes with black people in them and emojis and how it's a kind of racism / cultural appropriation.
It's digital blackface.
Is that what it's called?
Digital blackface, yeah.
Digital blackface is the name. When I saw that nonsense going on, I was like, man, can we smack all these Negroes who are complaining about this shit? I was like,
everyone should have been happy with the Simpsons, the yellow one.
I mean, like Kanye hasn't said a lot of prolific shit, but that I feel like that is Kanye's best take was just keep these motherfuckers yellow. I like my emojis Simpsons colored.
Well, you know, remember? I don't know if you'll remember. Do you remember when I talked to you all about what my theory is about all of this woke blowback, right? You remember when I talked about it? Jason doesn't remember. Remember when I told you that my theory is all of this white folk or pissed about wokeness is a product of, because of Twitter and social media, white people learned for the first time how much a lot of black folk can't fucking stand them because they saw their conversations on Twitter. And I think it shocked the hell out of them.
You think so?
I really believe that.
It's like the movie Soul Man?
No, seriously.
But in reverse?
I had a conversation with my buddy, my boy Lawrence. I mentioned Lawrence here. And I said, Lawrence, remember how when we were in college, like we always knew there was a crew of cats, you know, who really really hated white people, like the white man is the devil and all that kind of, you know, stuff, extreme nonsense. Like, yeah, man, there's always cats like that, whatever, so on and so forth. And I realized when I was in law school that a lot of white folk weren't aware of that kind of dynamic around black people.
Is that why you were giving out the cannoli in Bensonhurst, Pascal?
I wasn't giving out the cannolis. I wasn't even hanging out in Bensonhurst when I was growing up.
Where was you giving out all this cannoli? We was talking earlier in the show. And you said you was giving them the fucking.
No, that was that she was coming to the crib. I wasn't going.
Sorry about that. So you were all about the linguine and clams.
Yeah, she had to come to the crib. I wasn't going out to the. Even though, well, listen, you try to get me to digress into a whole other thing. I want to go there because I got stories. I don't want to go there. But the point I was trying to say is that I really think that reacting to seeing how certain black folk tweet their kind of racialized worldviews, I think a lot of white people who weren't aware of that were like disturbed. They were like, oh my God. Like it really kind of like, I mean, woke was a slang that black people used to speak amongst themselves. That shit is like public enemy number one right now. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, like the light skin versus dark skin stuff was not something I knew anything about.
I'll give you an example. This is real talk. I have a friend of mine, one of my frat brothers, nice guy, grew up in the Bronx. He's kind of an Afrocentric, like black nationalist. Like anytime he saw a black guy dating a white woman, he would say religiously, "Why are you dating one of those savages?" Like he called white people savages. Like that was his.
And did the brother respond back? She's got good credit, stupid.
He's like savage.
She finna co-sign for this cell phone, dumbass. Why you ruining my good shit?
Now, of course, his thinking comes from that whole kind of like, the from the caves of the Caucasus Mountains, kind of like, Nation of Islam kind of thinking. But this is not an unintelligent guy. This guy's a smart guy. He's a teacher, but he's straight up. That was like his term. It was like, a savage. And it was just like, I got other friends who would call like, white folk gray. Like he's dating a gray babe. But this is not uncommon. And by the way,
And
these are
yeah,
not.
I've never heard of any of this.
By the way, these are college-educated people. You know what I'm saying? So this was like a normal part of the conversational kind of repertoire I grew up hearing all the time. I can imagine if you hear that or you see this on Twitter regularly, and you're a white suburban liberal who's like, "Oh, I love hip hop and this is wonderful." I've got my friend Shaquina who's like, he's teaching me how to cook grits, and then you see motherfuckers call people savages, devils, and okay, it might jack you up.
Snow crickets is one of my favorites.
No crickets.
Look, man,
I think Snow anything is
shit
good.
mad silly or hella silly because I think I was telling this on the show. A woman I know who has gotten a very decent career in Hollywood. When she first got to Hollywood, I remember asking her, I was like, "Well, how is it?" And she goes, "It's nigga time out here." I was like, "What?" She's like, "It's just nigga time, man." And she's gone on to star in some, well, not star. She's been in movies, and if I told you who she was, you know who she is. I'll tell you guys off air. But she was like, Regina King is kind of, a big time star out here, and people love that kind of niggerish white girl sidekick.
And a white woman or a black woman saying this to you?
She's black as shit.
Oh, okay. I'm about to say, because I was about to say.
I thought the story was about a white woman. That's why it was funny.
I know. I
No, like how you have to coon. That's what's so funny about this redefinition of coon. For her to get roles in Hollywood, this gorgeous, talented woman, she's got to coon it up for the camera, and the roles that she has that you would know her in, that's not her at all. It's so far from the woman I met. She's like a New York socialite, but she's got to play, a sassy, and it's so not her. No, it's not.
She's an Afro-Saxon, as Pascal
Afro-Saxon, yeah. She's a straight up Afro.
And that sounds like a dangerous race. I think that's. I guess they are kind of.
I just wrote her name in the chat.
Doesn't help me because I still don't know who she is.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what
now.
in the chat.
Did you guys know I used to live in Greece?
Yeah, because you had to hide there.
Oh yeah, cool.
See, I remember your story.
Nice.
Folks like the Afro-Saxon.
You remember her now?
Not really, but she's.
Here's another one.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Yeah.
She's been in more stuff. These are the ones. Yeah.
Wait. Didn't she die?
Not that I know of.
But one of his wives died, didn't it?
Maybe in real life.
In the movie.
But in the movie. Uncle Ben from Spider-Man's totally alive right now.
Oh my god.
Do you know her, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, like I know who you're talking about. I mean, I didn't. Yeah.
But she did.
But honestly though, like, I mean, that makes the most sense in the fucking world, doesn't it?
Very attractive young woman. But check it out though. I was having a conversation with Torre about this, and I like Stefan's input. I was watching the show Luther. I really enjoyed that show.
Oh, that was a good show. That was a damn good show.
I noticed something watching a couple of British drama series or even sitcoms that had black characters. I think Djene disagreed with this. I've always found that the way in which British dramatic series or even comedies depict black folk had a certain humanism that was not tropish that you can't get in America. One of the things I love about Luther is that he is a black anti-hero whose race is not even a factor in terms of his good or bad behavior.
Have you seen Lupin?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I'm not sure how true this is generally, but I think especially Luther was kind of this example of where you had this dramatic thing with a black lead where kind of him being black was basically irrelevant. And that's why Idris Elba, I think after this was talked about, as being like a next James Bond, because he was playing this kind of role where it didn't matter that he wasn't playing like a black guy that was black, and that was somehow vitally important to his character. And so it was seen that he would be able to play someone like James Bond.
Right. What I realized is after watching Luther is that they would never be able to do something like that in the United States. There would always be some kind of attempt to have this kind of tropish storyline thrown in that was really corny and really stupid, that kind of racially reduced him in a certain way that wouldn't be like, and I found Luther very, very refreshing because of that.
I mean, in the UK, we have to focus our kind of intensity on kind of our class division, which isn't a Marxist class division, but it's a cultural class division. And so there isn't kind of enough social animus to spend so much on racializing completely everything.
We don't get that in the States because, out there, it's like accents too, the way you talk, education.
Right. Like a British person can tell the class of a British person just by looking at them on the street or hearing them speak a line.
That's what kind of fucked me up and really woke me up to class was my time in the UK.
By the way, black women with British accents are some of the most sexy sisters in the world, man. I love an Afro Brit with that accent, man. God damn.
There's one that's a bad. Who's the chick? Who's the woman from? She was in Black Mirror. She was in the White Bear episode of Black Mirror.
I don't know.
I know.
It's hard to Google because black's already in the title.
She's very. I like that woman.
Luther was amazing though.
Luther was a great show.
It was a great show. I like Idris Elba as an actor. He's a really good actor.
Do you remember Idris Elba when he was a video hoe?
No, I didn't know that he was a video.
Angie Stone. He was in the Angie Stone video.
Was he really? He was really good in that recent drama about cowboys in Philadelphia.
She was in. So this one, not her, but her as well. She was in the series with the other dude from your hood, Stefan. Loki, the one you just posted.
Angie Stone is a dope singer. Dope neo soul.
Yes, and that neo soul thing from the 90s. A lot of that was done in one studio in Atlanta with Questlove and D'Angelo. No, not her at all.
Okay, that's what Google gave me.
No, she's in another show. She's in another science fiction show in the UK as well. I can't think of which one that is. Not The Expanse, but
I don't really know much like any actors, to be honest.
Well, Marcus apparently disappeared. I'm assuming he had to
Luca Quinn. Someone mentioned of a woman named Luca Quinn. She's a very attractive woman. No, I do have a bit of a kind of attraction to Afro-British women. I find that accent very alluring.
So now you guys know how to get to Pascal's cold heart.
My heart gotta be cold.
Be colored with an accent. Well, on that note, we've been talking for too long, and these episodes get hard to upload for the audio only. Oh, there he is. He's back from the bathroom.
Yeah, sorry. I just figured I'd come in and come out, didn't have to ask. Which, Pascal, like, do you hit the little button, little video button? You gotta wait for these motherfuckers who don't pay attention, right? Like, in, boom, boom. That's all on me.
Stefan is going to be on Sublation Media in how long, Stefan? A half hour?
Like a fucking hour.
Oh, in an hour? In 1 hour, Stefan will be streaming on Twitch with Doug Lane.
Doug's not going to be there, I don't think.
Oh, Doug won't be there. I lied. I have to watch Doug Lane's interview with Max Blumenthal.
I have no interest to watch that.
That was 20 minutes. I mean, Max is really clever, but he's also a propagandist. Though I agreed with him on many things.
And I have to watch the Kuba response. So I will watch both of those things. Please check out Sublation Media. If you haven't liked it already, please like it. And on that note, on behalf of the crew, on behalf of our guest, Dr. Nik, I don't want to say his name wrong again, so I'm just going to call him Dr. Nik. I have a problem with saying people's name wrong. Ask Kuba. Take care. We are out. I promise.
Are we?
Maybe we're not.